Hey, it's Ocean, and today I want to talk about something I love. I've already talked about something that I hated before. This time I want to talk about something that I really love a lot. So there's this movie called Kick-Ass. It's about this kid named Dave Lazuski, and he's just a normal guy, normal schmo. He's just a normal guy with a pretty generic life. He becomes a superhero and stuff. But what I mainly want to talk about, and this is mostly aimed at people who have seen the movie, right? But if you haven't, I'd advise watching it before you finish this video. But I wanted to talk specifically about one scene at the very end of the movie, or like not right at the very end, but probably like right before the end. There's a scene when Dave is on this jetpack with miniguns attached to it after Hit Girl has fought all these other people with guns and her other weapons and stuff like that. He rises up, and I don't remember exactly what the music was precisely, but the music had like this jovial type of like upbeat, I don't know, like silly type of tone to it. But what's so great about the scene is the setup for it. The setup for the scene, in my opinion, at least on some level, is like the entire movie prior. Because although there's some pretty great action in the rest of the movie before that scene, none of it had yet reached that level. And why I think this scene is so incredibly good is because of the contrast. Because up until that point in the movie, the only action we'd seen is like some fancy work with some of Hit Girl's weapons where she's spinning it around, and some gun work, some John Wick type stuff, And the reason why that scene works so well with the jetpack coming up is that they built up to something that is so exciting when everything was so ground level, and they built up with things getting more and more exciting with the mob bosses and Big Daddy going through the warehouse and, just taking everybody out in a super cool way, and they built up to that. And because of the contrast of it being just a normal guy in the beginning and building up as his journey progresses through the plot and through the movie, I was like so pumped up when that scene happened. I absolutely loved it. And I loved it for that reason. And it wasn't just because of that. It was because this guy was invisible in the beginning of the movie, right? So anybody who's been a teenager and who's been a guy knows that there's a lot of pent up like aggression that you feel when you feel lonely. And the way he just yells and goes, screams what he screams, which is got profanity in it, but like he screams in a similar way to a kid playing Call of Duty would like scream at somebody he's shooting up, right? It's almost like it reveals the immaturity of him, that he's still a high school kid and he doesn't really grasp what he just did, just unaliving all of these people, right? He doesn't really grasp it yet. So there's that layer to it as well. But they so perfectly execute it where it's like this movie has dramatic moments, things that have like made me teary-eyed and stuff, right? But it has the comedic tone like mixed in with that. And they do such a good job with that, with him coming up and screaming at the villains or the henchmen in the same way that a teenager would scream at other players on Call of Duty. As he's screaming, he's telling them to lose their lives and swearing at them and stuff. And it's such a cathartic experience because you realize that like that was something that was pent up in him for the whole movie. And even though the movie's not really themed around that, it's like you see there's a catharsis to it because he's taking out all that pent up frustration inside of him on people who deserve it, right? Not to say that hurting people is a good thing at all anyways, but like just as a scene, it's just so incredibly good. And I love the way it's shot too. I love the way it shows him when he's going up and you see this shot of everything, and then he switches back to him and you see his screaming face, and he's like shaking his face as the bullets are flying through it. And it's just, as the music complements it, it's just a really good scene. And I've seen some people say that, specifically like Mr. Sunday Movies or something, I heard them say that like, oh no, I think the jetpack is too much. I think they went too over the top with it. And I disagree. And the main reason that I disagree with that, and I think the jetpack is fantastic, is one, jetpacks actually do exist in real life. They don't fly for as long as the jetpack in Kick-Ass flew, but they do actually exist. They just don't fly that long, and they don't usually have guns attached to them, as far as I know. So I think the jetpack was okay, like an okay level to get to. It wasn't like a Iron Man thing that can maneuver around missiles. It was just like slow, and it wasn't like it wasn't like janky, but it's not like it was an amazing jetpack that you could fly at supersonic speeds. You were just kind of floating around, and it reminds me of those jetpacks that I saw on, I want to say Mythbusters, where somebody was demonstrating it and there was like these turbines attached to the guy's arm. It kind of reminded me of that, the way it just flew around in a very just designed machine-like way, the way a jetpack would. So anyways, I love that scene, and like all the build-up throughout the movie just leads up to that well, especially when Dave is in the mirror before they go there and he's looking at his bloodied face, and he's got a whole mixture of emotions of like terror and just feeling frightened and traumatized by what just happened to Big Daddy, like obviously all this is spoilers for the movie, but the way it builds up to that, I just think that scene where he flies up and he goes across, like the way they built up to that is why that scene is so good, because all the scenes before that jetpack scene are pretty grounded, at least when it comes to the standards of how grounded things can be within a movie universe, right? So that's one of the reasons why that scene is so good is because everything is so much lower to the ground and less bombastic and over the top before that. And even though it's not that over the top in my opinion, because jetpacks do exist, it is over the top compared to everything else. And that contrast is really brilliantly done in my opinion. And I'm sure I've witnessed it in other movies before, but I can't remember an example right now. But I just love the idea of just doing a normal type story, and then like it just builds up, and then there's just this cathartic explosion of something that's more intense and more visually exciting and more of a spectacle than the previous set of circumstances that were happening before, that were more low to the ground. Like in the beginning of the movie, he's just a normal guy whose mom dies of an aneurysm and stuff, and he's just a normal everyday kid who wanted to be a superhero. And a lot of kids wanted to be superheroes when they were young, and they just never did it, And this is definitely one of my top 5, probably like one of my top 10 or top 5 favorite movies, because it got a lot of emotion out of me. It got a lot of joy and excitement and just escapism out of me, and it hit me in the feels like when Big Daddy died, and that might be because I'm such a big Nicolas Cage fan, but I also love his character in that. And I love all the characters in that movie, and all the choreography for Hit Girl and all the fights in general is fantastic. The action is wonderfully shot. I love the music, the music that's full of energy, and it just punches you in the gut with how fun it is, and this movie screams fun and color and just an explosion of, again, energy, of like excitement. And I'm not at all opposed to like darker themed, more serious comic book movies. I like both. For example, I've liked the Zack Snyder DCEU movies a lot more than most people have. I liked a lot of the ones that he did, but I love these colorful ones too. I love both of them for like different reasons. I'm not one or the other. Anyways, I think that's all I really wanted to say about it. I just wanted to talk about it because that's one of my favorite scenes from any movie ever, because I'm super obsessed with this kind of stuff, and I love the contrast. Yeah, I think that's all for now, and have a good day.